Hi, listeners. Welcome to the start of Monsterhearts Return to Mercy Falls. If you haven't listened to the original Mercy Falls series, I recommend going back and checking it out. For this series, the players are Philip, who is playing Jonah the Queen, Yoshi, who's playing Serena the Vampire, Kevin, who's playing Margot the Werewolf, and Lowell, who's playing the new character, Ellen the Ghost. Fraser, who played Lilith the Fae in the last series, had to sit this one out, so we'll catch up with that character in the next series. This series was originally played as part of Gauntlet Hangouts. It was 4 3-hour sessions. We have edited those sessions down to about a dozen episodes, roughly 30 minutes in length each. This first episode is largely a recap of the previous series, but one of the things we do is spend a fair amount of time figuring out how the new character, Ellen, fits into the story. After we ran this series, one of the biggest points of praise we got from Lowell was how seamlessly we managed to work Ellen into the story as if she had been part of the world all along. Since we do a lot of open table play on Gauntlet Hangouts, we have a lot of experience in this regard, and this first episode is a great example of what that looks like. Essentially, we did a mini version of the Monsterhearts homeroom procedure for Ellen. We did her backstory questions, found a few NPCs she could easily hook into, and asked Lowell plenty of questions throughout. Enjoy. Okay, this is Saturday Morning Cartoons, Monsterhearts 2, our second series of Monsterhearts 2. This is the May series. The concept of Monsterhearts, of course, is it's teenage drama. The characters are literal monsters, but their monstrousness is supposed to be viewed as something of a metaphor for their changing bodies, their inability to control their emotions, and importantly, they're teenagers. That's really, really important. It's easy to lose sight of in the middle of play, but just remember that they are teenagers. They do have to answer to adult authority figures, despite the fact that they have these powers and stuff. And that's where the tension and the fun and the drama of Monsterhearts is at. It's that tension between I am a teenager, and when I lose control, I become this other thing. And what does that mean, right? Well, just picking up from last series, the tone was dark, but also it had a little bit of humor. It was a little funny at times. We were purposely going for a sort of Twin Peaks vibe, and in fact, our setting is very much like a Twin Peaks, aesthetically speaking, a Twin Peaks setting. Subject matter-wise, they are teenage monsters that fuck, and that's going to happen. The fucking always happens off screen. We fade to black on that. My line in terms of sexual violence is I don't mind creeping up to the line of threatening sexual violence. I definitely don't like for it to happen, and I don't like for it to be anything other than maybe something that's happened in the past that we refer to. Okay. So just kind of keep that in mind. That's not usually an issue. Then our stories don't normally go there. And then I'm also not a huge fan of violence towards small children either. It's another thing that I'm not really into. And torture, I'm cool with torture as long as it's off screen. So does anybody else have any lines or anything they just prefer not to, any subject matter they prefer not to approach? Talk about it now. Otherwise we have X card on the table. So
Nope. As always, you hit the same ones I got.
We have the X card on the table. If you want to invoke it, you just say X card, or you do this little motion on the screen, and we'll stop, and we will change whatever it was that you found objectionable, whether it was something that was uncomfortable for you in an unfun way, or if it was something that just kind of fundamentally did not jibe with how you perceived the story and your character. Importantly, we deal the X card without judgment, and we receive it without judgment. All right. In that case, I think we should go ahead and introduce the returning characters first. Just real briefly, give us your name, your playbook, your look, and kind of where we find you right now in the story. Yoshi, why don't you start with Serena?
Serena is a vampire. She is a female, so she and her pronouns. She's asexual. Where we find her in this is basically just trying to fit in and figure out where things are going and kind of messing around with being accepted and find people who like her as her, I guess, is kind of where we're at.
Awesome. Thank you. And we'll drill down on some of that stuff when we do our recap. Kevin, tell us about Margot, please.
Sure. Margot's Asian American using the werewolf playbook. Her look is rugged with predatory eyes. She was turned by being bitten a few towns back by another werewolf. Just trying to come to terms with the whole condition. She's had a hard time really acknowledging what she is, but I think after season 1, she kind of has to embrace it now. She has kind of a difficult home life. Her mom works multiple part-time jobs, so she's never around. So she gets stuck with a lot of the chores, and her dad's just a deadbeat who sits at home and drinks cheap beer.
Thank you very much. Philip, tell us about Jonah.
Jonah is a hot, sexy, and thinks he's the shit teenager who kind of runs his own little clique, which is also kind of a little sex cult that goes into the forest and fucks and pays tribute to apparently some kind of weird fae person that they thought was a forest god. Yeah, right now his clique is Rhodey, Tony, and Mr. Thompson, who just got arrested. And he used to have Dawn, but Dawn was killed by Margot because Margot's a fucking werewolf.
Awesome. So a quick recap of what was essentially the big broad strokes of what happened last time. The thing that was hanging over sort of in the background of the whole series was the disappearance of a student named Kyle Norwood. This student had connections to everybody else in the setting. He was our Laura Palmer from Twin Peaks, if you're familiar with Twin Peaks. His disappearance was kind of hanging in the background. The sort of main thrust of the drama with the characters all revolved around the forest of Mercy Falls, Washington. Mercy Falls is the name of our town. It has two principal industries, lumber and tourism. Those are its two main things. Our story is currently taking place in tourism off-season, so there's not too many like outsiders roaming around, except for one particularly conspicuous outsider. We'll talk about him in a minute. But basically, a lot of the drama revolved around like this forest, and each of the characters had like kind of a connection to it. So Jonah is essentially like a budding cult leader, and they would like go out and have sex and do weird smear things on their body and wear, masks and things like that. There's some indication that some of his crew would rather be doing something else, but he's just very particularly personally magnetic, and they go out there for him. Serena actually has difficulty being in the forest. The forest doesn't like her because she is an undead thing. And so whenever she rolls in the forest, it goes out of its way to harm her and do bad things to her to the point of like, we think trying to frame her for Kyle's murder. And then Margot goes to the forest to wolf out. Now, Margot learned in character, and everybody else learned out of character, that the forest is actually the home of like an ancient, unfathomable Lovecraftian entity. Okay, we don't know much about that entity except that entity has an avatar that moves around in the world. An avatar, a servant, a follower. It's a little unclear what the actual connection is, but he's called Big Man. That's how we refer to him, and he is a large old man, a very imposing figure. He wears a creamy yellow suit and a cowboy hat. Everyone else who's going out here in the forest, all these fairies, these vampires, and these cultists and these other people, they are non-true things. They are lies. And the forest is a true thing. And I'm here to cleanse this place of all the untrue things, right? He's got a certain cryptic philosophy that he abides by, which comes up a lot. But Margot is now his, to quote last session, Margot is his bitch. There was some chaos and murders and stuff in the forest, like all Monsterhearts sessions eventually aim toward. Mr. Thompson has been kind of more or less framed for that, or he's taking the fall for some of this chaos, including Kyle's murder. They found Kyle's body eventually. Big Man has exhibited the ability to glamour people and to make people think what he wants them to think, and he's basically planted some evidence that he can just like at any point like flip a switch and the cops will realize it's there. He's kind of holding that over Margot. He's using Margot, who he considers to be a lie, to fight other lies. So he kind of represents like whatever this entity is in the forest. We don't really know what his motivations are, apart from the fact that he seems to have like a problem with the modern world and this idea of creatures and entities and people who think that they can master this ancient, unfathomable thing. And then we have the other sort of like main thing that got introduced, but not really explored yet. But the thing that got kind of set up, the Fae realm has taken notice of this forest and the power that's there. They've been here for a couple hundred years, basically trying to like siphon off its power and enjoy it and do whatever fairies do. But that includes a dark Fae court as well. And that Dark Fae court, their prince has been shown in several interesting scenes last series, but now he is in the Earth realm. He has taken on the name Thomas, and he's registered for school. And now he's a student at Mercy Falls High. That was the very last thing we saw, was him basically arriving. We're going to be picking up basically a week or so after all those events. Like last time it was Kyle's disappearance. The big thing in town now is Mr. Thompson being implicated in the murders of 3 students, right? As well as a waitress named Norma at the diner. All these killings, which were all done differently. Norma was throttled. Kyle was drained of blood by a vampire. Don was ripped apart by a werewolf. And Alan's blood was turned to poison, and he just basically like turned into a black-veined, desiccated husk, right? Like, it doesn't even make any sense that Mr. Thompson would have killed all 4 of these people in terms of method of operation, but it is nevertheless like what's going on. And now we meet Ellen. So let's learn about Ellen. Just go through everything. I want to hear everything that we know about her.
Ellen's a tall teen, but not that sort of thin tall. And not athletic tall like she would be on the basketball team. And she's kind of conscious about that. So she tries to make herself smaller because boys don't like it. Dressed kind of that she throws things together, but it looks very affected. Like she's kind of doing it deliberately. There's a kind of a cry for attention there. She wants to look wild. You know, she wants to look crazy. But the most other thing she's got is like a nose piercing. Very conventional, sort of cut across bangs and straight down hair. So she's kind of attention hungry to shock, and she kind of wants to be in, but she doesn't know exactly how to do that. She's kind of been a little bit isolated in terms of her home life, but she wants to be emotionally connected. And that's in part because she had a home life that was very cold. Her dad's one of the city attorneys, and they live a little bit outside of town. Her mom and dad both had computers, but they never really had like internet for her to use, like weirdly isolated. You know, she's got a phone that is literally just a phone. So she doesn't like have all the social media stuff, but that's forced her to be much more sort of trying to grab attention in real life. That's made more difficult by her having been murdered several times. She's not a ghost like a transparent ghost. She's much more a revenant. She keeps coming back. And it's very much a Twin Peaks thing, in that there's some off-screen thing going on with her parents. She's sort of haunting them. And every few days, maybe a week, when her dad kind of cracks again, her dad murders her again, you know, drops her in the river, buries her in the woods. And her mom has done it a couple of times as well, because there's some abuse there. We'll leave that off screen, but her mom feels guilt about that. She's an at-home editor, so there's this weird kind of coldness there. Ellen kind of keeps coming back. It's like she has nightmares, and then she's back, and she knows something's wrong, but she keeps, you know, just doing her life.
It sounds almost like the parents are like replaying their drama over and over again, right? As described, it sounds like Ellen's just caught up in the loop. Unless Ellen does something to like instigate these instances of like them killing her? Or is it like is she purely a victim here? Like, what do we think?
Ellen is trying to gain attention and interact with people and stuff. And so that's her kind of own haunting of herself. And then her parents are caught in that weird loop. It's like they're both going on 2 different circles that are intersecting.
Yeah. We should name the parents.
Let's do Harold Gibbons and Rachel Gibbons.
Well, does some of the instances where Ellen gets killed again, does like this happen like when maybe Ellen reaches out and tries to like tell somebody else about like what's going on?
You know how in Twin Peaks there would just be things are going along normal, and then somebody just does that brutal act of violence, and it feels so random? I feel like that's the loop they're caught in, that sort of weird, it turns from normal life to just flipped weirdness.
Yeah, that's good. It's like Leland Palmer, like dancing in the living room, and then suddenly he's choking out a girl, right?
Yeah. And I imagine that the first place that her dad buried her was in the woods.
You don't take an incorporeal form then.
Right.
But you do have the move that allows you to like view people in their private moment. How does that normally play out for Ellen?
I imagine that she actually goes into people's houses, that doors just kind of unlock for her when she goes in, and she walks, and she probably just kind of watches. It's kind of like sleepwalking, but she's aware of it, maybe not completely in control of it.
I like the idea of like things just always being kind of open for Ellen.
She probably goes to places where people have parents that like their kids.
I was going to ask, like, why would she engage in this behavior? Like, what is she looking out for? What is
So
she
what you're
observing?
saying is none of the other player characters.
None of the other places.
Right, yeah. All the rest of them, like, well, we actually haven't met Serena's folks yet, but we know that they're glamoured humans, like they're not even like her actual parents.
Now, I picture that she has a circle of friends at school that are kind of second tier. She likes to shock them, but then,
I love it.
goes and she watches them while they sleep. I imagine that there are many corpses of her out there.
Oh, it's like her corpses hang out too. That's interesting.
One of my backstory strings is I assume that someone saw my dad or my mom dumping one of the bodies at some point.
I also think that if we're kind of honing in on this idea of like the forest having its sort of like unknowable will, right? Or the entity in the forest. The forest is, the stand-in for that. Having this unknowable will, it makes sense that like you would have this loop going on of these people who are like flagrantly committing a murder of their daughter. And A, no one putting the pieces of the puzzle together, and B, like just no one noticing what's going on, right? Like I think that's super interesting. And it plays in really nicely to a scene that happened last series. Big Man just essentially like threatened and attacked Margot in the middle of a crime scene. And the cops were like, hey, what are you doing? And he was like, don't worry about it, get out of here. And the cops were like, oh, okay. And they just left. Like it was a really creepy scene. It was super unnerving, but it's that kind of thing, right? Like the forest wants you to see what it wants you to see. And I think that's super interesting. Does anybody else have any more questions for Lowell about Ellen before we do backstory?
Are you dead? Like, I know you're a ghost, but like, does the forest think you're dead?
That's a really good question.
Because the forest does not like undead things. That's a thing that has been expressed.
No, I think I'm not like fully alive. I'm more like a plant that's been respawned.
I like also the idea of like, this doesn't have to be what's happening, but I like the idea of like the forest trying to understand the nature of human life and death, right? And like, so finding something particularly interesting about the way you come back.
And I imagine if someone finds one of the later bodies, the body's going to be strange. They'll show the wounds, have the bruises, things like that. But if they autopsy, it's not like a human being inside.
Yeah. Well, so how many times do you think you've been killed? Just ballpark.
Oh gosh, let's say 12.
Oh, okay, that's a fair amount. All right. And the backstory questions imply that you do have a history with these characters of some sort. Yeah, go ahead and just call them out.
So someone knows that I'm dead and how I died. So as I said, probably saw my dad dumping the body and might be kind of shocked when I get assigned to the homeroom.
Oh, I'll take that, Lowell, because Margot has that history, at least where she would go to the woods willingly because that was like her safe space. Now she doesn't have a choice. So
we saw Harold dump her body in the forest then. Okay, good.
And then the other one is I've been inside someone's bedroom while they were sleeping. Take a string on them.
That was probably me. My bedroom is
pantry, right?
Pantry converted to a bedroom in a way. I sleep on a cot. It's just like a mess. It's a really shitty situation.
The door handle rattles.
The door handle rattles, yeah.
I like it. So I get a string on you from that.
I want to just do a quick sketch of all the characters. I think I'm going to have Lilith like just be staying with her mom for a while. But I want to go through and just quickly give the basic like thumbnail sketch of these characters. So if we look in the upper right-hand corner, we start with Ben. Ben is like a kind of a geeky kid, very earnest. He idolizes Jonah. Jonah's mom loves Ben. Like we think Jonah's mom might like Ben more than Jonah. Chad is the high school football quarterback, but basically Margot fucked Chad, and now Chad is sort of like imprinted on Margot in that werewolfy way. He's in Hawk to some kind of like online drug dealer. Basically, Margot's agreed to kind of help him with that. We didn't get to explore that yet because, like I said, last series only happened one day. Chad's a douchebag. He's such a jerk. He's the worst character. Tony is kind of a sensitive artist, secretly a sensitive artist type, but otherwise he's one of Jonah's bros. Sarah's like kind of a hard charger, social justice person. She's also like really big into like getting into good colleges. Very Tracy Flick, like from the movie Election. Sarah works at the diner where Norma was killed. Sarah was the person who discovered her body. Rhodey is one of Jonah's clique. We haven't learned too much about Rhodey. He's just another bro dude who fucks in the forest with Jonah. Thomas, we don't have any pictures of Thomas yet, but Thomas is newly introduced into the setting. He is our Dark Fae Prince. A couple of the characters know this. No one else does. Austin, he was the drug dealer. That's right. Yeah, he's a school drug dealer, not a big player or anything.
Right. He was Margot's main line because she wasn't like reselling.
He's the one who put somebody to extort the money from Chad.
Oh,
right?
He sent Margot. Yeah.
Okay.
Gave me store credit.
Yeah, right, exactly. He didn't figure much into the rest of the series beyond that, but except for being just their connection to get weed. Dawn was killed in the forest by Margot in werewolf form. Kyle, we now know, was murdered. It was made to look like he had his blood conspicuously made to look like his blood was drained by a vampire, like to suggest that Serena did it, but we know that didn't happen. Alan is also dead. He was killed by Thomas's minions. And then Mr. Thompson is arrested. Mr. Thompson is a statutory rapist, for one thing. We know from Gaze into the Abyss, Jonah saw Mr. Thompson basically having another relationship with a student in the past, and then that student's life basically falling apart because of it, and in a really bad way, like in a become homeless, get addicted to drugs way. It's very sad. Thompson's not a good guy. Nevertheless, Jonah and Mr. Thompson hooked up. Mr. Thompson is mechanically a part of Jonah's clique. And that's the group. And so I guess my question for you, Ellen, I pose this question to everyone else. Two things. But the first one for Kyle Norwood. I want to know, Kyle's the kind of guy who, like, everybody had a connection to him. He was involved in everybody's business. I want to know, like, one memory you have of Kyle that is, like, really endearing, right? And then one memory of Kyle that is a grim portent, so to speak. So one reason why you like him, basically, and one reason why you were scared for him. And then the other question I have is about Mr. Thompson. Mr. Thompson is the kind of teacher who tries to be like, oh, I'm so concerned about your lives. He's not jaded. Like, he tries to be very, like, super teacher, right? I want to know what you've gone to Mr. Thompson for in the past for help with. Okay.
Hey, Lil, I got a question for you. The first time she was killed, was she a human then? Like, if we autopsied that body, would that be?
Yes, I think the first one, the one that's out in the woods, is probably that kind of decayed skeletal by this point.
Cool.
Oh, I want to retcon something slightly from my original answers, if I can.
Sure. Yeah, of course.
Let's say I've died like 6 times. I think 12 is probably too many. 6 feels better. Maybe 3 or 4 months ago, I actually got out and got to like a big party, where there was alcohol and stuff like that, and saw Kyle. And of course, people like Kyle, people love Kyle. And so, that's something I want. Was seriously drunk, and like cornered in the bathroom, tried to get him to have sex with me, but he saw I was drunk and, stopped me and then kind of talked me down, even though I'm crying at that point, and made sure that I got home.
Oh, good. Yeah. Awesome. Well, what's the signs that the signs that Kyle was ill-fated?
Now, how long ago did Kyle die?
Oh, he's been dead for less than a week. Yeah.
Okay. So I picture I died my first death well before him.
Mm-hmm.
And one of my nightly jaunts was going into his room at night, and that he was crying in his sleep, like when you have a really bad dream that makes you sad and you're kind of weeping even as you're sleeping, and would have done that for a long time.
I love it. Nice. What about Mr. Thompson? Everybody's gone to Mr. Thompson for help with something. Would you go to Mr. Thompson for help?
I went to Mr. Thompson because, I'd maybe seen an after school special, or I'd seen something somewhere, and I was like, I need to talk to somebody about what's going on in my house, about my dad, and went to speak with Mr. Thompson, and he was pretty good at first and stuff, but once he got the implications kind of what I was saying, and that my dad's a city attorney, he shut me down like cold, given his own history.
Problems. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And pushed me out. The last time I talked to an adult about that.
Wow, Mr. Thompson's the worst. All right. Thank you. So before we begin scenes here, I want to just remind everyone of a couple of mechanical things. First, as far as strings and conditions go, I will be a little bit more assertive about like offering you guys opportunities or suggesting opportunities to use strings and conditions. I do that in the first session, especially because they tend to be forgotten about. And then as far as scene framing goes, I will routinely and often hand over scene framing to you guys. Monsterhearts is a little different in that way, in that the rules state that you should look for opportunities to let the players frame their own scenes. I'd like to just re-anchor all the characters in their home life right here in the beginning, I think would be good, and then get you guys to school. And I want to start with Ellen. I think the scene is basically Ellen just getting ready for school and heading out for her day, right? But from everybody else at the table, I want to know, as the camera follows Ellen through her house, I want to know what we see as viewers that lets us know that are small bits of evidence of the violence that has occurred in this house before, okay? But from Ellen, from you, I want to know what you see that is a reminder of how much your parents love you. What does your room look like?
I imagine it's pretty Spartan, but with a lot of bookshelves, things like that. My mom is a work-at-home editor, and I don't get much internet. I don't get access to that. So there's not even a computer in my room. Instead, it's books and papers and things like that. A lot of them are, the bookshelves look like she's just collected books and maybe hasn't read a lot of them. And everything's sort of crisp. Her mom's wants everything kept kind of clean. Her one sort of ability to kind of keep her mom away is that the closet is probably just things thrown in there, because she's kind of putting together this wardrobe and looking to find something that's going to be striking there. So I imagine she's got like a flowery sort of vest over, a shirt that's kind of purple and white. And then she's got this, Salvation Army sort of green woman's kind of trench coat that doesn't go with that. Then she's got sort of worn jean pants and shoes that she's painted, but she didn't do a very good job with. So when they got wet, it's all kind of muddled together. With someone who had creative talent, it might have come together nicely, but it hasn't.
I think your mom principally works from home, and so she's there a lot. She will be making breakfast downstairs. What's your normal routine here? Do you go down, just grab your breakfast and get out the door? Do you go down and sit and chat with her for a while?
I imagine that my mom gets up early to work, and she has fixed the same thing like for the last year and a half.
I love it.
That's about the cycle. Like after a year and a half, she changes up. So essentially it's this 2 pieces of French toast, done with a crappy Roman meal bread and, a glass of milk.
I imagine your mother is the kind of person who she probably gets up at like 4 a.m. every morning, and she's been working for like 4 hours by the time you get up, right? Like she's that kind of person, right? So as you're kind of going downstairs, I want to know from the rest of the table, the detail that we see that is a hint of the violence that's taken place in this home before.
So since we know that there's a lot of bookshelves in there, what I think we see is one of the bookshelves, which is maybe like it feels like it's just not quite in the right place. And if you look at it, it's because it's been shifted over like 1.5 feet to like cover up like where the drywall has been like cracked because somebody or something threw into it. It's trying to cover up that spot in the wall.
Nice.
Camera tracks downstairs. You see a workbench. Must be Dad's workbench. Doesn't look like it gets used much. Everything's perfectly in place, except for there's this hammer, and it's just laying kind of tossed into the toolbox. Going closer, and you see a bit of what looks like it might be dried blood and other matter dried on.
Yeah, there's like scratches from nails trying to cling to the banister of the stairs.
And now the coup de grace. Ellen, what do you see that's a reminder of how much your parents love you?
There was a time when my mom kind of was interested when I was interested in something, and there are probably pictures of me in like the little horse riding outfits when I was, 8 to 10, and, some little ribbons and trophies and things like that. They put a lot of time and effort when that was something that I wanted to do, when I wanted a pony, and I got a pony and I rode for a while. Those are still proudly displayed on the banister. Not banister, on the mantle.
Good.
Mantle.
Yeah, the mantle. Your mother, even though she works from home and she's been up since 4 o'clock in the morning, she is put together. She dresses like she goes into an office every single day. Because frankly, working from home is no excuse not to be professional. She's wearing like a two-piece women's suit, like with it's in kind of like an aubergine, right? And I think she has like waspy helmet hair, and she sees you and she's got the little bits of French toast or whatever, and she sets it down on the table and she looks at you and she cocks her head to one side like a dog that's just seen something that it recognizes but is still trying to comprehend and fully process and understand. And she says, well, that look you're doing today is both oddly specific and yet really haphazardly put together, Ellen.
It's what we wear at school.
Your breakfast is getting cold, dear.
Oh, thank you.
And she, goes around the table and sits down, and she's got like a little yellow legal pad that she keeps on, keeps near her all the time, and she's writing down like ideas and notes for like clients or whatever. And as she does that, you can see like on her wrist, you can see like bruised fingerprints like on her wrist, right? Some sign of Harold's. I think she gets it from Harold too, right? She's writing down her notes, and gosh, can't believe all that stuff that's going on with that teacher. I mean, all these killings and bodies in the forest. I mean, it's shocking.
He was a terrible teacher. It was really bad. It wasn't very good.
Well, your father is being asked to act as local counsel for some of the prosecutors who are coming in. Do you know anything about Mr. Thompson? Anything that maybe you should share with your father?
No.
Talkative as usual, I see, Ellen. And then she kind of like continues writing. Well, you're going to be late.
Shoulders a little hunched, kind of held in, almost defensively here. Goes and leaves, and it's only once she's a certain distance from the house that her body language changes, that she shakes off that kind of pressure. Now she has to be interesting. So that's just kind of changing even little bits on her clothing and things like that, because she wants it to look like people ask her, oh, what's that? That's what she really wants. Nobody does, but that's what she wants.
I'm going to cut away. Let's cut over to Jonah. So Jonah, I think your mother like knocks on your bedroom door. I put the bedroom in air quotes for listeners. Jonah, you're going to be late.
I'm laying on my cot, kind of in a mess of blankets, just wearing boxers. Start rubbing my eyes. The sun is like coming through the really shitty blinds that are all bent and messed up. That's on my window. I just kind of like roll out of bed and grab some dirty jeans off the floor, start getting dressed.
Jonah, Ben came over. He brought breakfast.
Ben?
Yes, dear, Ben. You know Ben.
Why?
Jonah, try to show some gratitude, please. This is all from the other side of the door.
So I like rush to get my clothes on, walk out, and try and find Ben here.
She says, look, he made a granola tray bake. Where did he get the time? And she like sets it down and she's like slicing it up, and Ben's like, yeah, I like to do a little bit of cooking, and I my alarm went off earlier than I thought, and I expected it to. So what do you think? And he like hands you a piece.
Jonah looks at it and he's like, thanks. So you woke up early and decided to come make breakfast here?
No, I made it at my house, but I thought I would just come bring it's like half a tray bake, like he's like left some in the house, right? Yeah.
Right, okay. So I'm gonna try this granola bake thing.
Mm-hmm. Is it delicious?
I think it's probably like okay, but it's like weird hippie food in a way. Like Jonah never eats granola.
Right. So do you like it? Ben says again.
Jonah looks at him and then he's like, I think I'll just have a bowl of cereal. And he like hands back the half-eaten
Let's shut someone down.
Bake back to him.
We'll shut someone down.
Ooh, I got super high.
Let's just read the move since it's the first time we're doing it again here. When you shut someone down, roll with cold. On a 10 up, choose one from below. What do you choose?
I got a 13 total. So I'll choose they gain a condition.
Okay, what condition are you giving?
I'm giving Jonah the condition trying too hard.
Try hard. And your mother is just like, Really nice, Jonah. Really, really nice. Ben, he does this nice thing. He makes this breakfast for you, and you're going to act like that? Come on.
Well, I mean, whatever. I just want some Lucky Charms.
Nice. Good. As you're grabbing your bowl of cereal, you hear a car pull up outside, and there's a honk of a horn. Like, hurry the fuck up! I'm waiting on you. You don't know who this is. What do you do?
I'm just gonna go and look, pull aside the curtain in the living room and see who's outside.
It's a black BMW. It's that new kid, Thomas.
Oh shit!
And you've encountered Thomas as his like dark prince, his Fey Prince form too, right? Like you encountered him in the Fey realm briefly.
Yeah, I look in the kitchen and I see my mom fawning over Ben, and I'm just gonna like go upstairs and grab my backpack and just run out.
Okay, sounds good. Let's cut over to Margot. Margot, we've established you live in a shithole, and your dad is a piece of shit. He's the worst, actually. And like, what's going on in your head? You know, it's been a week since you've had that little trek into the deep forest with Big Man, and he kind of like revealed things to you and basically said you're mine now. And all this stuff's going on with Mr. Thompson. I just want to get a read on what you're feeling, what you're thinking. You haven't seen Big Man since or talked to him since.
I'm feeling really tense. Like I've got this feeling that the other shoe's going to drop
Yeah.
anytime. And every time like I get a message on my phone or I hear someone walking behind me or see a shadow out of the corner of my eye, I'm always like, oh shit, he's here. He's asking for me to do something. So got that level of paranoia, and it's made me even more tense at home too, with lovely family dynamics.
What does your bedroom look like? We haven't seen your room yet.
Really small, like 10 by 10 room, single bed, posters on the wall at the edges curling up. They're like heavy metal bands from the 80s, which is kind of weird for a kid now, but she's into the Scorpions and all that stuff still.
Yeah, Whitesnake and all that.
Yeah, Rat.
Rat. I love it.
And the bed is just a mess, although it's kind of funny. She's got some old Peanuts sheets on there, so seems really out of character for Margot. Not unlike Jonah's room, there's just like clothes over the floor. The drawers are open on the dresser. It's a really crappy like Walmart type dresser. So everything just looks really grody.
Your mom's already off at one of her 2 jobs, right?
Yep.
And dad is sitting there in his underwear, like his tidy whities and a wife beater. He's already started on his like first 6-pack of the day. He's like, oh, glad you're awake. I was thinking maybe you could make me some eggs this morning. What do you think?
Yeah, sure, Dad. What do you want? Scrambled? Sunny side up. So see me put the skillet on the stove, turn up the heat, throw in some butter. And
he's like, hey, could you put a little bit of like milk in the eggs this time? Last time they were real dry, real like not great.
Yeah, okay, sure, you got it, Dad. Anything to keep you happy. And you want some coffee to chase that beer with? Pull out a couple eggs and crack them into 3 or 4 eggs, crack them in a bowl.
He's like, no, good.
Of course he is. And I'll actually kind of try to please him, but I'm also going to have some of these. So I'm actually going to put some effort into it this time. Just to fancy it up, I'll throw a little pre-cooked bacon in there, crumble that up, mix it in there.
Yeah.
Put down the table.
He's like, I'm not going to say they're the best eggs you've ever made, Margot, but they're not half bad. He kind of continues eating. Hey, that guy came by again yesterday. Remember the one I told you about a few days ago?
Oh, you see her just like totally lock up and fork halfway. And what?
Old guy, big, huge old guy, yellow suit, cowboy hat.
Don't let him in here, Dad. If he shows up, just keep the door closed. That guy's bad news.
I don't know. He seemed all right. I mean, what's
he's a creeper, Dad. Don't get messed up with him. He's bad.
Well, what's going on? Like, is he your source or something? Are you dealing at school? Like, what the hell's going on? And if you are, how come you haven't hooked the brother up? You know.
No, Dad, I'm not dealing at school. Look, I just know that guy is like, he like stalks kids. He's been like creeping on me. That bruise I had last week, That was him when I tried to get away.
He's like,
How does he
I
react
don't
to
remember,
that?
I don't, yeah, he remember the adults can't see that. He was like, I don't remember you having a bruise on your face. What are you talking about?
Ah, man. Okay. Well, he's just
He can't be any worse than that Mr. Thompson. Jesus Christ. I mean, I always knew that guy was kind of like a, kind of a weirdo. You know what I mean by weirdo, right? But murderer, jeez.
well, I don't know. I this guy just gives me the wiggums. Just don't talk to him about me or anything. Just please, Dad, please.
He says, "Oh yeah, he left something here," and he gets up and he goes over to like a little, he's got like just like a little chest of drawers or whatever in the next room or like in his bedroom or something, and he says he found this. He says he knows it's yours, and he hands you your shredded shirt or jacket or whatever from when you transformed.